Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, Edgar and I will get you all of the latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts you and your school district. Plus, we are taking a further dive into the governor's budget proposal. Our good friend Baier from School Services of California will join us.
The ACSA Legislative Lunch Break starts now.
And it's just after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, along with Dr. Edgar Zazweta, ACSA's Executive Director. I'm Naj and Edgar, Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome. We are honored to have you here on a Wednesday after not being on last week. Edgar, you and I were at our Every Child Counts Symposium in San Diego. More than 1,600 great California educators were there to hear all about student services, special education. Again, another great ECC symposium.
Just on that note, Naj, a little bit of a shout out to our folks. They're probably not watching because they're busy planning conferences or recovering, but I think some of the unsung heroes here at ACSA is definitely our events team. Elaine Cervantes and the whole gang over there, Tracy's whole team. That, you know, this is a tough month for those folks. We have three big conferences, three gatherings, as you talked about. We had ECC, which is one of our biggest conferences. We actually had a negotiator symposium down in San Diego as well, and we're about to embark to the desert next week. To Indian Wells for our annual superintendent symposium. So while, you know, everybody sees the front side of it and you see the promos and the fancy shots and the speakers, our team is definitely grinding here this month. So we appreciate them, and we're light at the end of the tunnel for those folks. But it's been a good month of just seeing our folks, bringing folks together, and definitely looking forward to it. It's always one of my highlights, getting to get together with our superintendents. And this year we're in Indian Wells.
Yeah, not a bad place to be.
Not a bad place in the winter.
Right. As you and I sit out here and look at the fog and the cold temperatures, I was in a parka as I walked into the office today because it's that cold. So looking forward to
parka. You're like, as my teenage daughter will say, you're DTM. You're doing too much there, Naj. Parka. it wasn't cold enough for a parka.
I don't know. I don't know about that.
Here, I wasn't sure if I was going to bring this up. I wasn't sure going to bring this up, but I will.
Please.
I will. Your condolences on your Bears. I know that was a tough one. I can only imagine the rage of emotions that you felt there, especially in the final minutes, the fourth quarter.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you said parka, cold weather, made me think of the Bears.
It made you think about that. It just so happened that you connected those two dots.
That's where my mind went.
That's how my mind went. Yeah, just, to take all of you folks into the cabinet meeting yesterday, it took Edgar exactly one step into the conference room for him to start talking about the Bears. So I feel like this has been a 24-hour
I resisted
setup.
Sending you that text on Sunday night.
Thank you for that. Folks, Neri first on the chat with us today with a weather report from Los Angeles where it's 63 degrees. Neri, I wish we had that going on here in Sacramento. Coming up, Baier from School Services of California, one of our favorite guests here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. We know that the governor released his budget a week and a half ago, I think it was. She's had time to digest. We're going to get some additional insight from her and take your questions as well. Let's go ahead and bring in just a couple of news headlines, and we can start talking about the Trump administration. Edgar, they are now challenging the state in court over a law preventing oil drilling and gas drilling within 3,200 feet of a school. KQED radio in the Bay Area reports that the state enacted a law in 2022 that creates these safe spaces, what they call health buffer zones, around sensitive areas like schools. And right now we know there's about 8% of the population that lives within that close enough region of some of these drilling sites. This spring, the U.S. Department of Education was directed to target state laws that banned or limited the production of energy, including oil and natural gas, coal, and many others. And the president has stated that increasing the use of these domestic resources will make energy more affordable. That according to KQED radio in the Bay Area. And I want to make note of this before we bring on our guest, because we've got some exciting news to report. Our good friend, frequent ACSA Legislative Lunch Break guest, Patty Herrera, who is a member of the Five Timers Club, like our guest who's coming on just a moment, named as the president of School Services of California. She's been executive vice president and was promoted officially this week. Edgar, give me some, because you were the one who broke this news to me yesterday. Tell me what's going on over there with John Gray and now with Patty. Give us the insider's look at this.
Well, we're super happy for one of Megan's new bosses there, like Patty, an old friend of ours. I mean, and I've known Patty forever, pretty much my whole career here in Sacramento, and I think she's respected as one of the top intellectual, individuals when it comes to the budget and policy and whatnot. But more than that, I think as we've seen here in her growth at School Services, become such a resource to the field, not just as her expertise on the finance side, but really growing and building the team at School Services. I mean, I think she had the foresight, even at our expense, to take our beloved Megan over to School Services and others. But I think they're a force, and they're building a great team over there at School Services. And credit to John. I think as a leader, one of the things that you always want to think about is, how do I leave this place better than when I left it? And John's not going anywhere. So we don't want to break any news here. Like John, what they're doing at School Services is they're splitting kind of the role like they had back in the day when Ron Bennett was at School Services. Is he's still going to be the chief executive officer, but she's getting the role of president. So it's kind of a split leadership right now, with an eye on the future as John maybe phases out over the years, that Patty is really being set up for that position. But they're doing a nice job in terms of that procession building and really putting her in a place. So we're super thrilled for Patty. I mean, she's not, like you said, not only on this show, but on every the whole organization there at School Services is a true partner, as stated here with Megan being here this week. Big week for them, and I know I'm really thankful for Megan joining us as we were just talking backstage. I know some of our viewers are probably at their workshops yesterday, or will be at their workshops later this week, and she found some time to be here. So excited for Patty, excited for all of them over there at School Services. I think it was great news that we were excited to share some of that pride as well.
Part of me wonders, you said that Megan was speaking at a panel discussion.
She was way more than a panel. I should have got video on this. Like, just for folks that know School Services, like they have these massive here at the Sacramento Convention Center. I don't know. I think I'm not overstating where it's thousands of attendees that show up, and they basically do a half-day program of a 3-hour deep dive on all the aspects of the budget. So Megan had to do it. I actually had to leave right before Megan was on, or I would have got her on video. I would have given it to Michael. We would have seen her in action.
Yeah.
But I know she's become a pro and a veteran at that. And I know she has a couple more workshops here this week. So I'm sure some of our viewers will be seeing her there in Orange County, I believe, tomorrow.
I would be very interested, Edgar, to find out how many autographs she signed.
That's what I say. She's I know that whole School Services team, Megan included, is definitely a little celebrity there amongst the finance world.
Yeah.
It's funny I say that here we're keep talking about her before we bring her on, but that way she can't.
It's better to do it before we bring her on.
There is some pride, there's some pride, a little bit of pride of father there when I see her doing her thing. Here's the thing, Megan was a big deal. She was a big deal before she came to us at ACSA. And now, obviously doing her thing at School Services, but they have a good one there, and all part of the same team here in the education advocacy world. So it's a big week for them, and so really thankful that she found a little bit of time for us.
Yeah, absolutely. The governor released his budget proposal on January 9th. In it, designated education money in the rainy day fund, several ongoing commitments, and a 2.4% cost of living adjustment. So what does it all mean? We've got our expert. We've been talking about her. Edgar just said she's a big deal. So we're that excited to bring on Megan Baier, Director of Governmental Relations from School Services of California. Megan, how many autographs did you sign?
I am not even going to engage in this discussion, but it's really lovely to be back with you, and I appreciate all the kind words. So, but yeah, no, we don't do autographs, Naj.
Yeah.
She charges for them. That's she didn't give those out for free. No.
A part of me thinks that there's somewhere there's like one of those Anchorman team photos, where they're like all kind of stacked up, and Megan is in that somewhere. That exists. All right. So we just mentioned, Megan, January 9th is when the governor's proposal came out. I got to ask you how you would characterize this proposal. Are you optimistic? Are you taking a wait and see approach? Or are you aligned with the Legislative Analyst's Office, which has described this plan as, quote, alarming and financially risky?
Yeah, there's a lot to be celebrated, I think, especially when looking at the education side of the budget. But I think what the Legislative Analyst's Office is referring to are the revenues that the governor is using. He's using much rosier revenues than the Legislative Analyst's Office think are actually going to materialize. So the real concerning piece is, one, do we have an artificial intelligence bubble? And if it pops, what is that going to do to our state revenues? We know a lot of the increases we're seeing are due to a small number of companies, which is a fiscally precarious place to be in. And I think the secondary piece that's concerning is, despite the governor's projected increased revenues, he is also still projecting deficits. So a $3 billion deficit this year, growing to $45 billion in 28-29. So it's concerning that we're not in a recession, but we're still projecting these massive deficits.
Megan, I'm going to dive into one of the issues that I know you guys talked about yesterday at your workshop. Yvonne went in depth here when we did Yvonne gave us the info. We talked about it. It was Cordell who went into depth about this $5.6 billion settled dollars. And I know sometimes I'm not going to lie, sometimes I feel that all us budget nerds are like really going deep dive about like, what this means. But it could be a little bit abstract for the field, right? Because what we're saying, it's money that they didn't give us, that they should have given us. I know you guys at School Services threw out even a per ADA number. I believe it's 900 per ADA, about what that could mean, right? But it's a little complicated here, right? In terms of what does that mean practically? What does that mean in terms of budget negotiations? I actually get sometimes a little bit worried that even as we're having these fights up here in Sacramento, and I know the CTAs of the world and CSBAs and those that have the big legal funds, they all have already kind of shot across the bow that they think that some of this maneuvering might even be illegal, and that we could, if this gets enacted, that they would challenge that, right? So all this to say is folks are trying to make sense of their budgets here, trying to figure out what they can plan on, negotiations. I do worry a little bit about like that. This is not necessarily money that we could count on either, right? Because we're going to go fight for it. But even then, those dollars, there's no guarantee, even if the state gave us some of that money, we don't know how they would choose to give us those dollars, right? It's not like here's just an extra 900 per ADA discretionary. So anyway, I said a lot there, but what's your take on this whole fight, the battle? I know it's a priority for you all as it is for us at ACSA, but how do we make sense of all this for the field?
Yeah, so I would start by thinking about, the Prop 98 minimum guarantee is essentially the formula that says this is how much education gets. We fight very hard as education advocates to make sure that we actually get that minimum guarantee. It is a floor. You've heard this said a lot, I'm sure. It's a floor, not a ceiling. But there's been many attempts, and particularly in the last few years, to kind of manipulate what that minimum funding level is. So the level of concern is really that this proposal withholds $5.6 billion from what the formula says education is owed. This is the second time the governor's done it. Last year it was about $2 billion. This year it's ballooned. I think the next question is, well, what's it going to be in the future? What if we hit a recession? Are we going to see $10-20 billion? And in past recessions, education has been the budget balancer. So that's something we don't want to see a return to. We want to try to protect those funds and what we're constitutionally owed through Prop 98. So that's kind of the big overarching picture. In terms of how it impacts districts and the local impacts, at school services, we try to quantify, because what is this abstract $5.6 billion? What does this mean for me? We don't know how the legislature would appropriate that out. So what we did is we did just calculate if it went out on a per ADA basis, like say it got shoved in the block grant, in the discretionary block grant, which I know we'll talk about later. It equates to about $909 per ADA, which is pretty substantial. The big caveat there is it could go into Prop 98 and they could do something totally different with it. So we ultimately don't know. It's really just important that we continue to protect that minimum level of funding, and we don't see those protections that Prop 98 affords us eroded over time.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you saying that, because I think this is where we're all of us in the education community, labor, management, everybody, that I think us being really consistent on that. Education, the Prop 98 can't just be a slush fund, right? Where any time that there's issues on the other side of the budget, that you're just going to borrow at the expense of our schools. So I think, credit to some of our partners too, who have also really consistent. And ACSA, obviously, this is going to be a major issue for us as we move forward.
Yeah, and one piece I would just add, just to be totally clear, they're not just holding back the $5.6 billion and saying, we're going to pay you back later. They are using it to pay for things outside of education. They're using it to pay for general fund expenses. So it really is, the budget's being balanced essentially on the back of Prop 98. So that's the other piece that's concerning, if we were hedging against economic uncertainty and the governor was putting it in, the Prop 98 rainy day fund that already exists, I think that would be a different conversation, right? This is truly, the money is being used elsewhere for non-education priorities.
Megan Baier, Director of Governmental Relations from School Services of California, joining us here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. If you have questions, go ahead and put those into the chat. We'll try and get to some of them before we reach the bottom of the hour. Megan, you just mentioned the rainy day fund, and there's been significant movement with the rainy day fund over the past few years, a required deposit in 24-25, and then a full withdrawal 25-26. Can you just provide an update on the fund status right now and explain how the governor intends to reinforce it?
Sure. So the rainy day fund, it has a formula. It requires deposits and withdrawals under certain economic conditions. So as revenues increase or decrease, we see different actions taken. And sometimes it feels a little like whiplash, but that's really what's driving these deposits and withdrawals, is the formula that's set in statute. This budget proposal, we see a lot of money that is being required to be deposited into the reserve. This has a lot to do with those very rosy revenue assumptions that the governor has made. So we see multiple deposits over, the budget window. Ultimately, what that does do, that's important for locals to keep in mind, is that it will trigger the reserve cap. If these revenue assumptions hold, the reserve cap will be triggered in 26-27. So something important to keep in mind. But remember, this is a January proposal, so it's not yet final, and it might evolve from here.
Megan, one of the issues that you brought up that I wanted to bring back around is the discretionary fund dollars, right? That's one of the pieces. And I know when there's one-time dollars, yeah, we sometimes hope that more of those dollars are ongoing, but because of these complicated formulas or how they're accounting for the dollars, that there's a big chunk of discretionary dollars. So if you could recontextualize, what that means, how much that is, and then maybe be getting into some of the politics around this, because I know you've been at the forefront of some of these fights and what we anticipate some of the conversations will be, because I know that's a little bit of peril too. Sometimes as districts are trying to budget for these dollars, what we might expect. We obviously know the governor's perspective of trying to just put these dollars out. As far as we know, I know we haven't seen trailer bill language, as far as I know, but we expect that this is going to be discretionary. But sometimes that there's other perspectives in the legislature about how these dollars should be used. So maybe you could speak to that. So one, just what are we talking about here? And then two, what do you anticipate some of the conversations will be?
Well, the governor has proposed another discretionary block grant. The administration has not yet released the details of the proposal. That's the trailer bill language that Edgar was referencing. We're hoping to see that language the first week of February is typically the tradition when we can expect that. The Department of Finance has said that they do plan, it is intended that this block grant will be fully discretionary, just like the block grant that was adopted last year. What we don't know is how that money will be allocated. I know ACSA engaged in a lot of advocacy last year to get it allocated on a per ADA basis rather than using a weighted formula and unduplicated, factoring in your UPP percentage. So that sounds like that's going to be another fight this year. There's members of the legislature that like to see those weighted formulas, and we've seen this from them in their different legislative hearings. So I would expect that detail, very important detail, to very much be up for debate this year and be another piece that there may need to be some advocacy on if that's where ACSA lands.
Megan, let me ask about federal funding, because I was a little surprised, and maybe this is kind of hidden in that, we're not really sure about how the revenues go, but knowing that things could shift in Washington at a moment's notice, I didn't see anything about federal funding in this budget. So why do you think that was? Do you think it was just kind of, we're going to wait and see, or do you think there's a plan in place should we have this economic uncertainty because there's some action in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I think the federal administration has proved to be very unpredictable. They've done a ton of things that we've never seen before. And, sometimes it feels like we have surprises every month. So I think that's part of the challenge, is it doesn't feel like something that we can plan for at this point in time. I think the other challenge is the state has limited capacity to backfill any cuts that happen. California has to pass a balanced budget. We don't have the ability as a state to carry debt the way the federal government does. And so it does limit our ability to immediately backfill any cuts that happen. And then, just this month, we saw the governor freeze 3 more major grants that went to states, one of them being a child care fund that districts that run childcare and preschool, they do see the benefit of those funds. And the Trump administration froze those grants over concerns of fraud, and it's about a $5 billion impact to the state. So, our attorney general has sued and it's got a temporary restraining order, but we continue to see, these different and new novel policy maneuvers by the federal government. So I do think it's just very challenging to predict what they're going to do next.
Megan, I have a kind of a technical question that I know school services stays on top of as it relates to the COLA, and I know we had talked about in November, I think it was, that the LAO had been projecting a 2.51% COLA. I think the governor proposed 2.41%. I know you all throughout the year kind of keep track of this based on the factors. Just how does this compare to what you guys were anticipating? Is there going to be any adjustments there? What happens with the COLA as we move through the year here? And again, kind of the same question: how should our districts be thinking about this and the potential final number?
Sure. And I would say complicating this year is that when we had the federal government shutdown, it shut down the federal agency that produces the data. And so we've had some data lags that have impacted everyone's estimates. But where we are today is, so COLA, the statutory COLA is calculated based on 8 federal data points. We right now, as of today, have 6 of those data points. So the governor and the LAO, the LAO also released their estimates back in November, right? So they didn't have all the data points that the governor had when he released his January budget. It's just sort of how it goes in terms of the sequencing of when they release their proposals and reports. But if you calculate the COLA today with the 6 data points that we have, it is calculating at about 2.41%. That's what the governor included in his budget. If revenue trends continue and the economy continues to perform well, we would expect to see that number go up a little bit, but it's really going to depend on what, how the economy performs in the next couple months. We will ultimately have the final statutory COLA amount by May. So we'll have that figure. And then just a reminder to everyone, in recent years, the governor has fully funded the statutory COLA, but that's not automatic. So if the state hits headwinds, funding statutory COLA is not always an automatic thing that happens. It's certainly something the Newsom administration has prioritized, though. So just always like to give that caveat.
Edgar, this popped up. David Roth has something here in the comments section. Asked the question: is ACSA willing to lead an effort to raise base funding levels for all schools along the lines of the 7.24% increase suggested by the LAO?
Yeah, no, first of all, kudos to David, because I know he's been really consistent on this issue and is actually some really interesting analysis of kind of the impact, run some fiscal impacts on his own with available data in districts like his and Buckeye and El Dorado County about what the impact has been, and kind of what this meant for other districts and districts that have kind of unique needs in different parts of the state. So I think it's a really interesting conversation that I think he and others have triggered about should we be thinking about. I think the simple answer in terms of the base grant, I think this is a bell we've all been ringing for a long time, that's one of the priorities that we all need to be focused on, right? So the short answer is that this is, as we're having these conversations here this year, I think before the budget came out, we had, I can't remember if it was Cordell and Yvonne and Diana, and I think even like we had the school services team, I think it was Patty there at the end of the year, talking about what issues do we think might be big here this year. And I think this conversation about LCFF is really at the top of it. How much traction does it get across the finish line? How serious do we think this will happen? So somewhat related to the budget, but also in terms of big policy changes. I think at the school services workshop yesterday, they had a cartoon about that. This is the 13th birthday of LCFF, right? And so it's grown up. But now, one of the things I think to expand on that analogy on the birthday is becoming a teenager. What changes do we want to see in this in this formula as it's got into this point in time? And I think the consistent piece that we've always kind of been on that trend, that's the place where we could benefit the most, is increasing the base grant. So I think to David's efforts and to others, that I think this is one of those things that we do want to explore. What are going to be the efforts in the Capitol here this year? How serious are these kind of conversations are going to be? But that's always when we start in this LCFF conversation, and usually that's where it starts for us, is raise the base grant. I'd love for Megan to comment, because I know they have some other folks that they work on, and I know this is something that they're thinking about in terms of base grant and other parts of LCFF, kind of just bigger picture, what you're seeing and what you're thinking of, what you all are thinking about as this conversation continues.
I think there's a lot of interest in revisiting LCFF. The budget sub-chair over education, Assemblymember Alvarez, has a bill, that looks at different components. He doesn't have base rates in there, but he does have a minimum COLA, setting a minimum COLA to try to recognize, ongoing increasing costs that happen for everybody every year, no matter what. So kind of along those, similar lines. I think the real challenge this year is there isn't a lot of revenue to do it. So, increasing the base, each percentage point, we're talking billions of dollars here. And so I think the real challenge is finding the money to pay for it, and implementing any changes to LCFF in a way that doesn't create harm for other districts. So I anticipate that these conversations will continue this year. Whether we'll actually see funding attached to potential policy changes, I think is probably more likely in out years, but it'll be interesting to see where Assemblymember Alvarez takes his bill, and he's really leading on that conversation right now in the legislature.
All right, final question, Megan. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to answer this question. All right, as the legislative process moves on, as we go through legislative committees and all of that, 30 seconds. What's the one thing that was in this budget that you think is a non-starter?
Oh, I don't know about a non-starter, but I think that $5.6 billion is going to generate a lot of conversation and about what the minimum funding level needs to be. And I think we're going to see a lot of work on that point.
Can I ask you, can I give her another 15 seconds to maybe do the flip side, since you're Debbie Downer?
You're the boss. Go for it.
Since we always get accused of, it's our job, as I like to say, we have to find the things we don't like with it. But any bright spots, any things that like, hey, we should be happy about this, and we need to fight to make sure that it stays in there.
I think thank you, Edgar, for the positive question.
Naj?
I think a real bright spot is in special education. So this governor has really prioritized equalizing rates. So previously and currently, every district has a different per ADA rate to fund their special education program. There's been many efforts over many, many years to equalize all rates, and this governor has made a lot of progress on that front. With this budget proposal, he's proposed an investment in special education that'll benefit all districts, and it will equalize rates, bringing rates up to about $999 per ADA. So we know special ed's a big need. We know this is going to help all districts. So certainly great to see the increase, and then that long-term goal of equalizing funding. It seems to be within our grasp. So I think that's a bright spot.
All right. Edgar says she's a big deal. We will leave her with that moniker. She's a big deal. Megan Baier, Director of Governmental Relations, School Services of California. Megan, welcome back. We were happy to have you. I'll look forward to having you next time.
Happy to be here.
Folks, we have rounded the bottom of the hour, but want to remind you about ACSA Superintendent Symposium. It is next week, starts Wednesday in Indian Wells. This is going to be another one of our favorite events, Edgar. You can see the information right there. You can register today by either scanning that QR code after the show is done, or you can go to ACSA.org/professional-learning for more information. Expecting more than 500 of our state superintendents there. And then don't forget about our 2026 Equity Institute. That's March 25th through 27th at the Westin in Anaheim, titled Equity for Real, Anchored in Integrity When the Tide Shifts. Again, there's a QR code, and you can register, of course, ACSA.org/professional-learning. And folks, if you like what you've seen here on the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, we invite you to become a member of our family on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. You can subscribe to us there. And if you have great stories happening in your school communities, we want to tell your stories too. Go ahead and send your talking points, your news releases, and your photos to our EdCal editor, Michelle Carl, at mcarl@axa.org. Edgar, I'll give you 30 seconds here because we've had a chance to digest everything that Megan had to say. Megan left with a positive there. I'll give you the opportunity. Yeah. What do you think as we move forward?
I mean, I think it kind of captures. Well, first of all, I always love to have Megan on and just helping us dissect kind of what's next. So I think the big takeaways for us is, like, obviously big fight, the settled money. I think we all have a role here in the education advocacy community, a fight for what we should have, not just what they gave us. But, like I said, I think given the show we had a couple of weeks ago, they didn't really give us anything. It's the formula that tells them what they have to provide education, right? They're just making decisions on how they're distributing it. It's schools' money, right? So I think we have to remember that and protect those dollars that are owed to schools. So that's going to be a prime fight for us. And then but some of these things, discretionary dollars that we need to make sure that we push to kind of keep those as flexible for the field as possible. And I think Megan ended on a good piece there. As much as we talk about special education services and whatnot, that was a nice piece that's in there. Obviously, we acknowledge the federal government's not doing enough. It's a drop in the bucket on the big picture, but I think this incremental increase, I think the acknowledgement of those pieces, I think, is always important. So a little bit of everything there.
Yep, absolutely. Folks, a reminder, we're not on next week. Edgar and I will be at ACSA Superintendent Symposium, but we will be on the week after. Thanks so much for joining us here on the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here on ACSA YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.